now, but I believe Dr. McBride and Dr. Cunningham and Dr. McGuire should be joining us. So good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Doing well. Hope everyone there as well is also.
Yes, absolutely. So we can call the meeting to order, but we can't approve anything until the rest of our board members begin calling in. See, Dr. Cunningham is joining us.
Good morning.
Good morning, Dr.
Morning.
Cunningham. How are you?
I am doing well, as much as I can with a baby that don't want to sleep at night.
Oh, man. Okay. It looks like Dr. McBride is here, but he's an attendee. Here he comes. Dr. McBride, good morning. Wait and see if we can get.
There he is.
There he is. Oh, we can't hear you, Tim. Still no. Sorry.
Me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Excellent. Good morning. How are you? Okay. Well, I think we can go ahead and do our roll call vote. Or, I'm sorry. Yes.
Dr. McBride,
Here.
Bishop Hankerson, we know is not here. Dr. Bozeman,
Here.
Dr. McGuire, and Dr. Cunningham.
Okay, so we have a quorum. Thank you all for joining us this morning. First issue on our agenda is the approval of the May 24, 2024, that's a mouthful, meeting minutes. So if you remember, we did not have our last meeting, so this is from way back in the spring. These have been circulated. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved, Senior.
Thank you, Senia. Do I have a second? Dr. McBride, second. Any discussion? So any edits, deletions, comments? And I know there was a few comments flowing back, and I think we got those all taken care of in the meeting minutes. Okay. Hearing none, all in favor of approval, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you all for that.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Good morning, Dr. McGuire. How are you?
Okay, that was quite an adventure. They would not let me get in as a. I'm glad I'm here.
Yeah, good morning. Are you still in the United States, or are you on your trip?
No, I'm still in the United States. I'm in Wisconsin at a cousin's wedding.
Ah, okay. Very good.
I don't for India until December.
Okay, fantastic. Well, good morning and thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
Okay, let's go ahead and move on to our next agenda item. I'm going to turn this over to Director Bess for the census population.
So we're gonna blend this with the dashboards for the population of pretrial, so Aaron will take it over.
Sure. And I'll discuss a little bit about the population now. If we want to go more in depth back into the dashboards and more of the specific data later in the meeting, in the dashboard section, we can do that. But I wanted to clear up a few things before we talk about any of the specifics. The population as of this morning is at 1196, so it dropped under 1200. At 1196, and just to speak to the issue that Dr. McBride had brought up recently, there was a note cited in the article in the newspaper yesterday that the population had, quote, more than doubled over the last 2 years. That is not accurate, though it is true that the population has gone up quite a bit over the last 2 years. We bottomed out at 745 at the end of 2022 and are now at 1196. That is a 60% increase. Not to minimize the fact that it's an increase, but it is not more than double. So that particular number that was cited, we don't know how they came up with that particularly, but it's not quite right.
So it wasn't like a doubling of, I think they were
There
trying
are
to
certain
split it
subgroups
out.
within the.
Correct.
That's right.
I
There are
think
certain
that-
subgroups within the jail that have gone up at different percentages.
Right.
With low-level felonies where the increase was 140%.
Okay.
High-level felonies was 23%.
Right.
Certain subcategories have gone up at higher rates than others, but the overall jail population has not doubled.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And Tim, I think that's what you were bringing up as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, if I could, and I appreciate that, that comment, and Aaron, and yeah, I brought this up in email yesterday after reading the Post-Dispatch article, and I think it's really important to go on the record it was the first line in the article that said that the population census in the jail had doubled, and, I'm not gonna minimize the issue that, it's of course important that there's 1,200 people in the census, and I'm sure we'll talk about what that means, but I'm a data person and I want this to be accurate, and as Aaron just mentioned, that's about a 50-some% increase relative to the end of 2022. It's not a 100% increase. So obviously that's substantial, but it's not a doubling. What were you going to say, Aaron?
I think it was right at 60%. Just
60%.
since we're setting the record straight, I want to make sure all the facts are stated right.
Yeah, it's really important that we get this accurate. So 60% is obviously a big deal, and we'll talk about what that means, but it's not doubling. So I think I surmised, and Aaron just mentioned that they may have been talking about the low-level felonies, but anyways, the first line of the article appears to be wrong. And I think it's just important that we get that on the record.
Thank you, Dr. Brian. Go ahead.
Since we got that clarification out of the way, I am happy to, this is kind of up to you, Director Best, happy to discuss data in more detail now.
Yeah, we
With
can.
regard to this, you want me to do that?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, let me share my screen then. It's been a while since we've looked at the dashboards. But as I mentioned, I know this is kind of small to see on here, but as I mentioned just a minute ago, the population as of this morning was 1196. It is high, but it is an improvement over where we were, say, about 7 weeks ago. We were at 1279, so we've gone down about 80 people in the last 7 weeks, which is real progress. As for this is something that we can touch on a little bit more if others have questions, but I wanted to mention that when you look at the increase, the way that the breakdown of the jail and the way that the increase has kind of manifested specifically into certain subgroups, the average daily population for September 2024, so last month, because we haven't finished this month yet, was 1224, and
Can you scroll up a little bit there, Aaron?
yeah.
Just so I can see the
Oh,
whole
I'm
graph, the
sorry.
page. Yeah, there you go.
Looking
Thank
at my
you.
screen, my fault.
No, you're fine.
So in September 2024, last month, the average daily population was 1224, and of that 1224, on average, 1029 were pretrial. If you go back to the end of 2022, in December of 2022, so about 2 years ago, the average pretrial count in that month was 674. So if you look at the overall increase between the end of 2022 and now over the last 2 years, the 60% increase in the total jail is largely comprised of an increase in the overall pretrial population, which is not overly surprising because fluctuations in the jail usually are comprised of people who are here pretrial because that's the majority of the jail. But I think it would just be good to state that to go on the record.
Aaron, before you go on, I want to, because with terminology to me is also important.
Yeah.
Because we've been using pretrial and the term pretrial in so many different ways. This is referring to pretrial detention.
Yes, people who are here before their trial, that's correct. So this is referring to people who are here in the jail awaiting trial. Later, we will talk about people who are here as part of the pretrial release program. Thank you
Yes.
for the clarification. And if you look at the bottom right chart here, this is a breakdown. The multicolored bars here are just a breakdown of, they're a zoom in on the blue bars in this chart. So if you see the pretrial of 1029 for last month, you'll see that that's where this comes from here, 1029. And you can see a breakdown of what that average of 1029 is. And as you can see from the chart, as I think was mentioned on the earlier this morning, high-level felonies haven't changed all that much. If you look at A felonies, they were at 331 last month, which is an increase from 2 years ago, but it's not a massive increase. Whereas if you look at, for example, D felonies, were as of last month, we averaged 282, and then 2 months ago, or excuse me, 2 years ago, that was more like, that was in the low 100s. So the point that Dr. McBride made, and it's a good point, and this might be the point they were trying to make in the article, was that different subgroups within the jail have increased at different rates. Namely that of the CD&E felony, class CD&E felonies, which are the low-level felonies, have increased 140% since, I think it was December 2022.
So just so I understand this correctly, but this is of persons that are in the jail.
Yeah, so, right. So the bottom row here, the way that those numbers are derived is that within each month, it's basically daily snapshots averaged out.
Averaged out.
Yeah,
Okay.
all smushed into one bar.
Right.
Now, that is, well, I saw Dr. McBride raising a hand. Do you have a question?
Well, I don't, this is all great, Aaron, and you're doing a great job of laying out the data, so I don't want to derail this, but I'm gonna have questions about the kind of the causation behind this. So I don't know if I want to, I'll put that out there, but if you want to say, can we talk about that later? Maybe this is the way that Dr. Garza wants to handle it. But, you know, I think it's really important to get this data out there and be crystal clear about what it is. But I'm going to have some questions about what's behind these numbers.
Right. So let's do this, Dr. McBride. Let's get through the data real quick, and then we can get to why are we seeing these numbers. So I think we have the same question. My impression of this is within all of pretrial, so not just detention, but pretrial. There's 3 different categories, right, Director? Pretrial detention.
Yeah, so in this case,
release.
we're talking pretrial detention.
Yep.
And then we'll show another data on pretrial release.
Yeah, that's
Pretrial release supervision.
And that's
Right.
what's going on.
What
Okay.
we're not covering is pretrial diversion. That's all, that's
Okay.
with the prosecutor's office.
Okay, because that plays into this. When you're moving up and down on one, it's going to affect this population as well,
Correct.
right? Okay. All right, Aaron, sorry for interrupting your train of thought there.
No problem. Okay, so next what I want to show, and this is actually something I don't think that we have looked at all in a board meeting yet. I'm not sure why it's so squished there. There we go. Okay. Reload this because I just uploaded new data. There we go. All right, so as of this morning, this is a brand new dashboard I should mention that is, covers our pretrial release population. These are not people who are in the jail. These are people who are out on pretrial supervision. As of this morning, there are 217 people who are here, who are in the pretrial supervision program currently. They have averaged 326 days being supervised. This population is broken down a few ways. You can see that by PSA level, which is a risk assessment level, you can see that a good number of them are lower risk. So 97 out of 217, which is just under half, are about the lowest risk category that you have by PSA level. A small number of them are in levels 4 and 5, which are the higher risk categories, but not a huge number. I will also mention that
And just for clarity, Aaron, sorry for interrupting you, but the PSA, that is a screening tool, correct?
risk assessment.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so our count has fluttered in the 200s for most of the past 2 to 2.5, 3 years. We did, during the kind of first year and a half of COVID, have a lot of people on pretrial supervision. That was actually, looks like the peak was about 480, so it's got more than double where we're at now.
Right.
The middle row just shows you the number of people each month who have been released from our jail to the pretrial supervision program. And then that is broken down in 3 ways. So you can see it by PSA level each month. You can see it by felony class. You can see that when you look by felony class, a very substantial portion of the people who are released from our jail to the pretrial supervision program are Class D felonies. And then you can also see it by charge category, which is guns, personal property, and drugs. On the bottom row, this shows our breakdown of the successful pretrial release cases from the pretrial supervision program, both by type here and by basically the reason for successful completion. And then you can also see public safety rate, which is essentially the percentage of people with no new arrests from the pretrial supervision program, and the appearance rate, which is the court appearance for court versus non-appearance for court. I should note that these windows on the bottom row are all selectable, so this shows everything from 2021 onward. Oh, I need to move it down. Sorry about that. But you can also unselect and select certain years if that's what is of most interest to you too. So this is a dashboard. I think it's been around for a few months now, but I think this is the first time we've been able to cover it in a board meeting. So I just wanted to show that briefly, and I will.
Aaron, can you go back up? Can you go back up? Where you see current pretrial release population by PSA level, the one thing that I do want to highlight there is that is not unusual where you see the low risk, the level 1. You know, you want to see, you know, as many people who are low risk, level 1s out on community supervision prior to trial in terms of pretrial release. And where you see the darker green, the levels 5 and the level 4, again, that's usually you'll see a low number of those individuals, because then that means when you look and see your custody levels, those individuals, the larger number will be individuals in custody.
Mhm.
Okay, so just wanted to point that out.
I think it's only 36 total level 4s and 5s out of 217, which is only like 15%.
Right. Okay. Can you scroll back down to the bottom now, Aaron? Thank you. So if I'm interpreting this public safety rate, and I think you have it selected for all years. So,
It's everything since 2021.
so that's all comers, right? Have they been, is it
So-
rebooked?
I'm sorry.
Or-
This isn't people, this is looking at pretrial supervision data. So what this is saying is
Right.
that of the people participating in the pretrial supervision program, I want to make sure I get the wording right.
Right.
Of the people participating in the pretrial supervision program, there were 5.58% who ended up with a new arrest.
With the newer.
So we call them legal violations.
Yeah, and there's 94.4% that didn't.
Okay. And you remove,
And there are lots of different outcomes, of
Yeah.
course, but
yeah, and okay.
you'll see that the public safety rate is pretty high. The appearance rate isn't quite as high because,
Right.
you know,
Right, so about 75%, 74%
And
make their court appearance.
yeah, and I would argue where we would want that, my belief is we should always try to have that below 10%.
Okay, the failure to appear.
Yes.
Okay. This is extremely helpful. Thank you, Aaron. for
yeah, no
doing
problem.
all-
This is now available on our website along the other 2 dashboards. And I update this twice a week, so.
Okay. And then one last question for you, I think, again, scroll back down. Can we average out the pretrial release over time. You know, so I see, you know, you got counts there, right?
Are you talking about in the top row
Yeah,
here?
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
'Cause
yeah,
if-
we can. I mean, I could get that number for you, like, and see what the average is on a daily basis between 2021 and now.
yeah,
Yeah.
because that'd be interesting to see the trend. I mean, you can
We
see
have a
the
daily
solid
table.
numbers.
I can make it, I can get it in a minute.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, great, thank you. Dr. McBride, does this answer your questions or generate new ones?
Oh, everything Aaron does, definitely helps answer questions, and it sometimes it raises more questions, but it, you know, I just want to give amazing kudos to Aaron because, as you know me, everybody knows me. If Aaron didn't produce this, I'd just be asking more questions. So just thank you for your hard work and transparency. So, you know, I think if I could ask a couple of questions, is this a good time?
Absolutely, yes.
So, you know, if I could just put us at a helicopter level first, just so, you know, the general public that's listening, and so I make sure that I understand this. And I was looking up things last night and just now, because I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a criminal justice person, I'm just a silly economist. You know, the A and B felonies, you know, are very serious, violent type felonies, and I'm not saying C and D are not important, but they tend to be less violent. Is that the right way to put it?
C, D, and E, Dr. McBride.
C, D, and E, yeah. So I think that gets to your point that you're making, Director, about the green versus the yellow. So I just sort of wanted to state that, make sure I was understanding that. So I think my main question is, you know, so this pretrial thing helps, but you know, that sort of dropping down from 2021 to 2025. And if you could go tap on the other dashboard, Aaron, the previous one we were looking at, you know, this big increase that we're seeing since pretty much the end of 2023, and that it's more in the pretrial category, and it's more in the D felonies and even E and less. You know, I guess my question, and I was noting that we don't have anything before 2021, and I've been on the board back that
Well,
far.
we do, it's just that with the dashboards, they're set in a window that always shows the last 4 years.
Okay.
Last year, it said 2020 to 2023.
Yeah, but
That's it.
so I was going to point out that during the pandemic, you know, the early part of the pandemic, I recall that you know, there was a really big backlog in the jail. I mean, in the courts, which had repercussions for the jail that they had to hold people longer, if I recall that. And then part of the reason that if you scroll up, the census dropped was because that started to get cleared out as the pandemic ended. But then, you know, I guess what we're talking about right now, and I want to just have a little bit of discussion about it, is what the heck is happening after 2023. And I think in our previous meetings, you know, I think the backdrop of what I asked previously is it's not that there's been, in the article sort of mentioned it, it's not that there's been a big increase in crime, it's that there's a big increase in certain types of, it's not a big increase in violent crime, it's certain types of felonies. But my question is there a backlog in the courts that's causing this pretrial to grow and the census to grow, which is having this, and that's what I'm asking. And it's long-winded way of asking a question, maybe not that articulate, but my main question is there a backlog in courts and in the pretrial category, especially for the lower level felonies that are making this happen?
So I know that Prosecutor Bell mentioned yesterday, and it's referenced in the article, about, quote, the courts are still working through a backlog created during COVID-19 pandemic. So obviously, I would have to explore that more for me to comment, but I would only go by what, he is saying from that standpoint. What I would say is two things. First, I think as already shown on the screen, when you look at the dashboard for pretrial release, it shows that we are underutilizing pretrial release supervision. So you see your numbers under the daily population going up, and then you see your pretrial release supervision numbers down. That right there for me says we are underutilizing an option that we have that we can provide to the court, and that is pretrial release so that people can be out, they can be supportive of themselves, they can be supportive of their families until their time of trial or until they plead guilty. So I think that's one way that we can address this through pretrial release supervision. This is not anything new. It's a national, program that many jurisdictions have. We are learning about it with the state of Illinois and how they went through a statewide, pretrial services system. So I really do think, we are underutilizing a department that we already had, for years, pretrial services. And we just need to, put more emphasis in it. And that's something that we, are planning on doing as well. So that's the one response, Dr. McBride. And then the second response, is what I brought up yesterday about what we're seeing with some of these higher bonds that have to be paid, in cash. So I'll give you a good example, and this goes back to, and I got to tell you, I will put in a plug because I think the world of Aaron Levin as well. So I'm there, I'm right there with you. But when I look at the data that Aaron and I discussed, let's just say back on October 8th, for example, and this was based off of a population number at the time, excluding those that were in intake of 1,220. 828 people in the jail with cash-only bonds, and out of that 828 people in the jail with cash-only bonds, 773 have no 10%. So no 10% for whatever that bond, is, you have to post that my understanding, I should say, is that you have to post that entire bond if you want to get out. So as an example, if the bond is 500,000 and you don't have a 10% attached to it, then you don't post 50,000. You have to post the entire 500,000. A lot of the folks in custody for us are indigent. So if indigent individuals coming up with $500,000 cash as an example, I just don't see it happening. And then out of that 828, 55 had 10% allowed. So 10% to put down on that bond was allowed. There was 136 non-cash only bonds. And again, out of that 136, 76 had no 10%. And 60 had 10% that was allowable. So again, it gets into, and look, I'm not going to take anything away from the court as well. I know these are tough situations and tough cases that they're dealing with. So I'm only just reporting this is what we're seeing with respect to the higher bond issues, but yet folks not being able to post the bonds, and then some not having that 10%, that is allowed to be able to post a smaller bond, or a fraction of the bond that has been assigned. So I do think those are contributing factors, because if you can't post bond, then what happens? You're remaining in custody. And again, like I say, the underutilization of pretrial supervision, with that, again, it doesn't create a good situation for us at this point in time. And as a result, when you have folks that can't post bond, and we're talking about those C, D, and E felonies, as Aaron been talking about today, as I've talked about yesterday at the Crime Commission, then these individuals stay in custody longer than what is expected.
We do have data, by the way, on the dollar amounts for those that was a good correlation with that. At the beginning of 2023, low-level felonies averaged $68,000 bonds. Now, or as of 10 days ago or so, CD&E felonies average almost 98,000.
And do you know the percentage of bonds in 2023 that were 10% bonds?
I don't know across 2023, but I will say that, because I do these kind of basic snapshots in time,
Yeah.
but I will say that Director Bass cited that data, which was from a couple weeks ago, that showed that across the whole jail,
Yeah.
about 2/3 of all bonds are cash only, no 10%.
Mhm.
And for CD&E felonies, we've done the same thing, about 2/3, 65 to 70% are cash only, no 10%.
Yeah.
So both for low-level felonies and for the entire jail, 2/3 of everybody who's in is generally,
Mhm.
you gotta pay the whole amount, no way around
I got you.
it, in cash.
Could I just intervene with one other comment, and then I want to let the other board members say something if they want, but those responses are great, Director Bass and Aaron. Aaron, if you could flip to the administrative dashboard, I have a comment about this.
Sure.
And scroll, yeah, right there to the corrections officer ratio. From being on the board a long time, whenever the number in the jail gets to be over 1,000, I get nervous. Because, when we first got on, Dr. Garza will remember the numbers were that high or higher. And the Justice Services Center made really good progress in bringing that down. And some of the repercussions for that is less pressure on the officers and on the budget and yada yada, which also meant less likely to have incidents in the jail. So one of the things I always hone in on is that red line there, the resident to officer ratio. And I know the county and the county council is invested heavily in officers, but one of the problems I see here that gets me a little nervous is the increase in the resident to officer ratio there, which is, as I see it, is risen from 5.7 in the beginning of the year to now being at 6.5, and it's not as high as it was in 2023 or 2022, but the higher that gets, it creates other problems that we don't want. So I just sort of point that out.
I can respond to that. Yeah. Do keep in mind with this one that the resident to corrections officer ratio is a function of two numbers. The
Yep.
numerator being the population and the denominator being the staffing levels. And if you look at the chart from 2022 to now, the resident to corrections officer ratio actually doesn't correlate super closely with the overall jail population. And if you look at where it was in 2023, it was a lot higher than it is now. The fact that the resident to corrections officer ratio remains kind of at its more or less average point for where it's been over the past 3 years, despite a population of 1,200, is, could also be spun as a positive. So, I mean, I understand what you're saying, Dr. McBride, but, just keep in mind that that number is a function of both population and staffing levels, not one or the other. And as such, it needs to be taken in that kind of context.
Yeah, no, good point, Aaron, and I totally agree. I still think it's much better than it was. I'm more worried about the trajectory that it's going up.
Yeah, and let me just say this, Dr. McBride, as well, because this kind of dovetails into the other areas, so I'll just go ahead and put it on the staffing levels in the summer career fairs. Because it is a good point that you're making, but I do want to assure this board as well that, we are still out there doing as much as we can where the recruitment is concerned to be able to bring on board new correction officers as well as bring on board staff in general. I can tell you during the budget meeting just a week ago, as of October 14th of 2024, we, out of 231 positions that have been allocated, we had a vacancy of 23 positions at that point in time. 208 of those positions were filled, which is 90%, with 10% vacancy. Obviously the numbers are going to fluctuate, you know, and I can tell you these numbers and this ratio that you're referring to is going to be updated, you know, at the end of the month. So that will help as well. You know, on October 14th, I have to say, Justice Services took in 17 new officers. And knock on wood, thus far, they're still here. So 2 weeks later, they're still here. We haven't lost any. So, we got 6 classes that are running at the same time. So I can tell you these folks, especially our professional development department, has you know, really been very active and been busy, you know, trying to get these folks trained. We have 2 graduations today. Well, I shouldn't say 2 classes graduating today, you know, at 1 o'clock. So I get your point, and I do agree, and I understand where you're coming from. I can tell you, we did those summer career fairs for a reason, to try to continue to bring people on board. We did 6 career fairs throughout the summer, and it was throughout the county. And we are planning another career fair on November 19th that is specifically earmarked for veterans. But of course, we're not going to not accept applicants from other people as well. So it'll be at Mid-County Library because this is what I call community-based career fairs. We wasn't so this was all done in addition to folks coming to Justice Services also to apply. So we went out in the community to you know, try to bring on board some more corrections officers. Out of that, the 6 career fairs, we had 73 that was in attendance, 46 employment offers were made, 38 accepted employment offers. And I do want to touch on that a little bit so that we understand what we're doing here. Previously, I can tell you, and I made a statement where I said, you know, recruitment for Justice Services and bringing people on board obviously is not the big issue we're trying to, other than retention and trying to retain the folks, right? But I will tell you, one of the things that we did, because we knew and what we were looking at and we found was that we would align the new academy start date for new employees all on the same day, right? So if, let's say today is October 25th, but yet the academy does not start again to November 25th. So what we was doing was we would hold those individuals that were still in waiting and to start them October 25th. Well, instead, what we're doing now is we're saying, well, when is the next pay period? So if the next pay period, for example, in this case is October 28th, we're not waiting all the way to November 25th. We're saying, bring those folks in now so that we don't lose them in the waiting process because they're waiting to start, and then we end up losing them to other employers because that's what was happening. Bring them in now. We will find them something to do if we need be, or we would have them trained, you know, a 1-week crash course, 40 hours of a training so that they can at least serve as the secondary officer so that we can keep the 2 officer per pod, you know, requirement in play. So, you know, I can definitely tell you, you know, there is a lot of effort being made by staff. And our training department is, you know, they tell me every day that they're overtaxed, and I believe them. They are. So I like I say, I definitely hear you and I agree with you. But I can definitely assure this board, as well as Justice Services and the public, we are definitely, you know, doing as much as we can to, you know, to keep those numbers down, those ratios down, because we're trying our best to recruit and get people in. You'll start hearing, you know, when we did these career fairs, we had other strategies that we used was, you know, did local media, you know, radio announcements, and we're planning on doing that again in preparation for the career fair that we're going to have on November 19th at Mid-County. And we continue to use the Walls Group, you know, as well as the recruitment firm that helps bring correctional officers in, because they actually specialize in correctional officer recruitment.
Thank you.
Other questions
Hi,
from board members? Go ahead.
Hi, this is Diane. My question goes back a little bit. I wanted to say that it seems to me like a lot of the increase And I wasn't able to look at your data because I'm on the phone, but it sounded like a lot of it is being driven by judicial bond behavior. Like, you know, the judges are setting bonds that aren't being met. It sounds, if I heard what you said correctly, like those amounts seem to be going up, things like that. Do we have any insight into why that's happening? If indeed that's happening, if judges are holding more people over, setting higher bonds?
Well, I think, you know, I don't want to use the word holding over. I would say they're setting the bonds and the bonds are not being made. You know, so, you know, and there could be various reasons why they're setting the bonds, you know, high. You can have a repeat offender, where, you know, where people are coming back and forth. The court takes into consideration their criminal history. The court can take into consideration the severity of the offense, of what is going on in terms of the details itself. It doesn't have to be boiled down just to the classification of the felony offense itself. There could be, who knows, there could be a victim involved. There could be many reasons as to why.
But like, is your data showing that judges are setting higher bonds, you know, in this more recent year than in prior years? Are you showing that or no? I mean,
So
I mean, is there evidence that's happening or what is what I guess I'm asking?
yeah,
We have definitive data on low-level felonies, at least, that bond dollar amounts now average $30,000 higher than they did about 2 years ago.
and so that's for the entire population, Diane, of low-level
Yeah,
felonies.
400 something low-level felonies, yeah.
Okay, so I mean, that makes me wonder why. Now, obviously, there's
Right.
not much we can do about judicial decisions, but that
Right.
seems interesting to me. And that would be driving retention, because if it's going up by that much, yeah, that's going to eliminate a lot of people's ability to make that.
Right.
Exactly.
And then the second piece is the 10%. So it's sort of a two-step. So one is the total amount and the second one is the 10%. So, and that's how I was asking, what was the percentage of 10% in 2023? So obviously if it was higher, then your probability for making bond increases because it's a lower amount.
Right.
But
Sure.
no, yeah, yep,
Bond amount.
yeah.
Real estate bonds, sometimes people have relatives where they can put up a house. I didn't hear any comments about real estate bonds, whether that has fluctuated at all. But that could also be a driver, because sometimes you could
Oh, that's true.
get dad or aunt put their house up.
Yeah.
It was posted in the chat, by the way, that the Post changed the first line of that article.
Oh, did they?
Remove the word double.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. They must have been.
Thanks for listening.
So I think the point being though is the way that the numbers all sort of fit into different categories. So if you looked at the total population, there's not, I'm assuming here, that there hasn't been a overall increase in the lower level felonies across the board, year over year.
In terms of crime data,
Yes.
that I don't have access to.
Because then that sort of dictates, are these categories going to increase or decrease? If the first sort of gate that you need to go through is your bond hearing, then what is the level of the bond, what is the percentage of those bonds that are at 10%? So then that will dictate whether the jail population goes up or comes down, right? Now, a question for you is, do you have to make it first through that bond gate before you can be a candidate for pretrial release? I guess what I'm saying is if you can't even make the bond, then is pretrial release even an option for you?
Well, you have pretrial, well, let me see how to answer that. Some offenses are bondable, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, obviously, those offenses that are bondable, and this is where I'll ask you all to let me know if I'm incorrect, but it's just, I'm still navigating through the Missouri
Sure.
system,
Yeah.
but some offenses are bondable. And if they are bondable, then while they're in custody downstairs in our intake, it is likely they can post their bond as long as that offense is a bondable offense.
Mm-hmm.
In many cases, if they don't post the bond, by the time they go to court, then it's up to the court to then assess the matter and make a decision as it relates to
I got you.
both the bond, detention, you know, what have you.
Okay.
But pretrial can be an option, just like recognizance can be an option. I get you. just like recognizance can be an option. In
Yeah.
other words, you may have, a court may say, we're gonna release someone on their own recognizance.
Yeah,
So then
Yeah.
then that's fine too.
yeah,
What pretrial does for us is that it just, well, not for us, but for the system, it gives the court another option if the
Right.
court doesn't want to do, let's say, recognizance, because recognizance is they're on their own.
right. Right.
And the court wants, let's say, community supervision,
Mhm.
wants somebody to monitor the individual while they're out in community. Then all pretrial is another layer, another option, I should say,
Okay.
for the judge to be able to use. And then we would then supervise the person in the community.
Mhm.
And again, the two factors that looked at is the person a danger to the community
Mhm.
and risk of non-appearance.
Gotcha. Okay. So I think what would be helpful, and so I don't want to have to, figure this all out today because we're a little time limited. Would it be possible to do what's called a process map where you sort of start off with the big population, then you can kind of draw a path to say certain percent are going to go this way, certain percent are going to go this way. Some end up in jail, some of them end up in pretrial, some end up over here, things like that. Just so I think it would be helpful for the board and myself to just see the entire thing sort of laid out graphically. That this is the potential path of any individual. And granted, I'm not gonna, you don't have to do it for every individual, but the chunks, where do they end up? Does that make sense?
And you're not talking about like numbers, you just mean a map.
Just a map.
Arrows.
Yes, exactly.
We can discuss.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That would be extremely helpful. And so, did you need to say anything else on staffing levels, Director?
Nope.
Or summer career fairs?
No.
Okay. All right. So before we move on to the pretrial supervision, I just want to publicly acknowledge all of the hard work that's gone into getting the staffing numbers up. So they've worked extremely hard to recruit officers. It's an innovative approach to make sure that they are engaged in the system before their formal training even starts. And I think the numbers reflect all of the hard work that's gone into that. The training, I understand, they're being worked hard, but of course, once you get through that pipeline, that training is going to drop off because now you've got a full complement. And so you're doing the hard work now, but it'll pay off later. And of course, that affects the ratio and everything as well.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make sure that was on the record, that you guys have done a really great job of on the staffing, and that's hard. That is really hard work to recruit people and keep them. So, okay. Let me pause there. Any other comments or questions from the board? Cinia.
I was just gonna say the comments that were made by, I think it's Mary who's on the line, is that correct? And I think it's just important, the points she was making are important. We're not a board that overlooks the court, so I get that point. But I think it's important that the Director Bass and everybody here reports to the council and to the county executive, and it's a bunch of moving parts. So what happens there affects what happens here. And when the director goes in and answers to the council and answers to the county executive, it's important to point out that, well, what's happening over there is affecting us. And I think that's the really important point.
Yes.
Exactly. Cinia?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Geiser. This is very helpful information, and I too want to compliment the staff for all of the work that you're doing and bringing this forward for us to review. I just need a point of clarification. The felonies, C, D, and E, are those low-level
Yes.
felonies? And A and B
Are high-level felonies.
are
yes.
high level? Okay, that's what I thought, but I wanted to make certain that I had that in my notes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I believe we are at the pretrial supervision update. Is that right, Dr. Beth?
Yes, and just real quick on that, just wanted to report out, and again, in the article it already stated, we've already started trying to staff our pretrial services unit accordingly, because we want to be able to push from more in terms of determining those individuals suitable for pretrial release. So we've increased our staffing levels from 3 to 6. We have, earlier this month, the county council and Dr. Page approved legislation for DJS to work with the Center for Effective Public Policy for pretrial assistance. So it's like technical assistance that can be provided to us so that we can refine, our pretrial services program here for the county. So once we, have that agreement officially in play, then we can be able to go ahead and move forward with that. And I think that should be wrapping up, within the next couple of days. But in the meantime, what we have been doing as a group is in-house working on some preliminary matters. As I pointed out yesterday to the Crime Commission, we've been working on some preliminary areas that can help to improve our investigations process to offer recommendations to the court regarding pretrial suitability. And this helps the court. And I think we should, be, doing whatever it takes to assist the court. So we're talking about, and we've actually documented, they're in draft mode and under review right now. We're talking about, how we're interviewing, going to interview well, I shouldn't say each defendant, but interviewing defendants as they come in. And I know I said defendants as a resident because they're not officially taken in yet, but also preparing those reports for the court that has a recommendation of suitability for pretrial release. We have identified draft guidelines that we will be able to review to make that determination. And I can tell you, this is not pulling like a rabbit out of a hat, so to speak. We've looked at the Pretrial Justice Institute implementation kit. So we've looked at that research, and everything that we're doing is in line with that, as well as we've utilized and relying on the National Association of Pretrial Services Agencies. They have some standards that they put out for the pretrial community, and we've been looking at those standards as well to come up with these guidelines. And then I've already talked about in the future being able to receive that technical assistance through the Center for Effective Public Policy. And then we've started to review our electronic monitoring guidelines as well, so that we, want to take a look at, make some changes where that is concerned. So we're on the cusp of putting a lot of this, out in that draft mode, obviously for the court and for our state public defender, as well as for the prosecutor's office to be able to provide that feedback, because we want to do this with them, and then be able to move forward with that.
So to summarize, you're building the process right now.
Yeah.
And making sure it's evidence-based, that it's based off of national standards, so that the court can have confidence in the process.
That's correct. And I can tell you, when we talk about these guidelines, we can be able to direct where we, how we came up with these guidelines by just basically looking at our National Association of Pretrial Service Standards. I know our supervisor for pretrial also gave some consideration to American Bar Association standards that talks about pretrial as well. We kind of debated on some things where that's concerned, but we're looking at exactly, we're looking at guidance from a plethora of entities, so that we can we're not just doing this, like I say, pulling a rabbit out of a hat.
Okay. When you have some of these draft forms, can you share them with the board?
No problem.
Whenever it's appropriate,
No problem.
I know you guys are working on it.
No problem.
Okay. Any questions from the board about that? I think that's, again, tremendous work that needs to occur to make the entire system function appropriately. And this is a big piece of that. Okay. Moving on to the CGL status update report.
So this was something I know, Dr. Garza, we wanted to provide, at high level, just give a progress update, especially since we had some new board members on where we are with some of the findings from the CJL report. This was a final report was completed on July 21st of 2022. And within that report that they provided to Justice Services, there were 71 recommendations. Keep in mind, 71 recommendations were not all Justice Services. From the security aspect of it, 44 recommendations focused on correction security, and 27 recommendations focused specifically on corrections medicine. This quick overview that I'll provide is just focusing on corrections security, so focusing on those 44 recommendations impacting Justice Services corrections security. Under then Director Anders, it should be noted that most of these recommendations were recorded as having been completed. In response to Dr. Garza's request, what I wanted to do in providing this update is just to make sure with me and my team, we went back through all of those recommendations. So we have undergone a re-review of these recommendations to ensure three things. One, whether practices implemented are still in place and achieving the desired results. Two, whether Justice Services chose not to advance forward with recommendations and why. And then three, whether some recommendations remain, pending for action, because again, 44 recommendations within this 2-year period, along with some of the other things that also need to be addressed, it takes some prioritization. So of the 44 recommendations, 17 of the recommendations have been completed. 6 of the recommendations have been completed. However, I define those as continuous monitoring is required. So some of the recommendations that was provided, were not like one and done ordeals per se. It's something that we need to continuously be engaged in. 3 recommendations were partially completed. And I say partially completed, one, just we need to put together a written protocol on it, but the actions is there. We just need to memorialize it a little bit, as well as, obviously some of the recommendations are impacted due to staffing or just needs to be followed up with.
Okay.
11 recommendations remain under review. In many instances, our policies are in drafting stage and requires further attention based on, obviously today's expectation. Because again, we're talking, this report was completed back in 2022. We want to make sure we're incorporating today's expectations in that new guidance. One recommendation obviously we're not advancing forward, and that is the staff general population. As you know, the county council requires 2, wants us to have 2 people in the pod. So while they recommended 1, we're not going to go forward with that recommendation, as we're going to continue with 2 pod.
Okay.
And then 6 recommendations are not completed at this time. Again, merely based on the issue of priority. But to date, I would say, again, Justice Services completed, 50% of those recommendations. And again, I don't want to sit here and take the credit where that's concerned. This began under then Director Anders. My point was just to make sure that we're still in compliance and doing what is expected. So over 50% of those recommendations, the matters have been resolved, but we will continue to prioritize accordingly that which we have not addressed yet. We are going to continue to look at it, doing so.
Okay. Thank you for that update. Questions from the board? And I know some of you weren't on the board when this overview was done, but it was a significant amount of work, I'll tell you that. Dr. McBride.
Yeah, thank you for that report, Director. And I think that's a good report, and I agree with you, Dr. Garza. There was a significant amount of work and attention brought to this. So in terms of due diligence, and, this is a good interim finding, but, as my own role in being a board member, I think what would help me, and just hopefully a constructive suggestion, if I could, and this doesn't need to be put on a public dashboard, but maybe it could be, well, I don't know what the lawyer's going to say. I always get, in trouble with that. But if we could get like, I know we've seen a spreadsheet at some point, if we could just get a sort of a documentation of which of those 17 and 6 and 3 and 11 and 1 and 6, I'll just want to visualize those, just so I get a better sense of that. And, just so, it's just my own job as direct board member to do that, and I'm not, questioning anything you're doing. It's just maybe some of it we could help nudge forward, and maybe you just need a little bit of help to, with your bosses to, the board is saying this is important. And, I think it's always going to be the case that you're going to put some things a lower priority. And, I'm 100% anticipating I'm going to agree with you, but there may be some things where we might be able to help you a little bit by nudging things. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Okay.
Makes sense. And we have a spreadsheet. Don't get me wrong. We have a spreadsheet that we've reviewed, so I don't think that'll be an issue for doing when we schedule this for next meeting.
Thank you. That'd be fabulous.
Forward, it should be me.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll discuss pulling that together, Dr. McBride. Yeah, almost like a, like a scorecard.
Yeah.
Some red, green, yellow stoplight stuff, things like that.
That's exactly the color with the spreadsheet. looks
That's
like
right.
now.
That's right. And then I anticipate we'll continue to review it and bring it back to the board on, if certain items move up or down or wherever they are.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. Any other questions from the board on that issue? Okay, hearing none. Aaron, turning it over to you for the dashboard.
Yeah, well, we already did a lot of dashboard stuff. So I think at this point, we saw all three of the dashboards, the pretrial release one and the two, the ones that the two main ones. So I think at this point, I don't necessarily have anything else I need to share, but I do want to entertain questions if anybody has any, and I'm happy to go into any more detail if anybody has any other questions. Or if there's something that anybody particularly wants me to share, I'm happy.
I think my questions are going to be about the corrections medicine, so I don't know.
Oh, yeah, we can do the corrections medicine dashboard.
And, I got two questions about those, because you're right, Aaron, we've pretty much exhausted the main points to make about the justice services.
I'll share the corrections medicine dashboard and I can entertain questions, and then Ava, if you want to chime in with anything.
Yeah, is Dr. Cunningham on? I think she is.
She is.
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Dr. Cunningham.
Hello.
All right, here's the first corrections medicine dashboard.
So my main two questions are about the one that, and I'm sure Dr. Garza will want to jump in on this too, is the one that mentions psych visits, and the one that talks about substance use disorders, and I think it's somewhat related to the medical visits. But what I notice if you look first at the psych visits, it looks to me like when you compare, thank you, when you compare like early 2023, if I hover over the pink line, which is a clinic visit, that was like 10 and it's now 15. So it was up to like 22 at one point. So there's a pretty big increase in psych visits. And then, just so I can get both my questions out at once, if you could go back, Aaron, and then pull up the substance use disorders one right next to it, because these may be related, and Dr. Cunningham or somebody could weigh in. And it looks to me like there's been a pretty steady and not good increase in opioid disorders, where it was like in the 6 or so in 2022, it's now 14. So that's, that is doubling. So, I guess I'd be interested in commenting about that. Obviously, this is not the fault of the jail. It's, it's reflecting society. So I'm just sort of interested in comments about that from Dr. Cunningham or others, but what stresses that's causing.
Yeah, I can. I don't know if I don't. I can't tell if Ava's there or not, but I can speak to this a little bit. So specifically with the increase in substance use disorders, what you're seeing is we've modified our program, and before I started, it was unfortunate criteria for individuals to be started on medications, and personally, I had a problem with that, and so we revisited access to care, specifically treatment for opioid use disorder. We've increased our screening at intake. We've been able to start individuals on treatment sooner rather than later. And we've also switched to using a lot more Sublocade because of his monthly injection instead of doing the daily dosing. And so we've definitely modified the MAT program. I shouldn't call it that, the MOUD program significantly. And that's what you're seeing here, that we are now capturing individuals who have a diagnosis of opioid use disorder. And we're not excluding individuals who previously should have been started on treatment, but because of the way the program was set up at its early stages, it was unfortunately creating a disparity in who had access to treatment and who didn't. So that's what you're seeing here. The reason, one of the reasons why the number is was actually the main reason that you see an increase in the number of individuals being treated for opioid use disorder.
That's very helpful. So that's really
Yep.
good background. Go ahead.
When were those changes implemented, Dr. Cunningham?
Well, when I started in January 2023, and I would say it was maybe around like 3 months after that,
Okay.
when we really started modifying, when I was able to really look at the program to identify what was going on. So it was, yeah, maybe 2 or 3 months after I started.
Yeah, I was guessing from the graph, it was April of 23.
Yeah, that's yeah, right around there, a few months afterwards.
So,
That steady increase, yeah.
Yeah.
so if I could jump in on that, Dr. Cunningham, it seems like I was surmising that there was something going on in society. So now I correct myself. It's something you're doing in terms of treatment. I would assume, based on what you said, and I'm not a clinician, I'm a fake doctor. So I assume this might actually lead to better outcomes or
Yes.
might improve outcomes, and just be all the better for our patients, and maybe not leading to some problems with them while they're residing with us. Is that correct?
That is correct, because what you see, individuals who are released from a jail or a correctional system, and they come in with opioid use disorders undiagnosed. Number one, what's taking place is that individuals go through uncomfortable withdrawal. And so we were seeing that. And before, they were, taking people to the infirmary, trying to manage the withdrawal symptoms. Well, that's the perfect time to actually start someone on buprenorphine. And so it was really modifying the protocols because the evidence have kind of picked up to, current management with opioid use disorder. And so on one hand, capturing individuals inside, it cut down on the amount of urgent visits or acute visits with codes and things along those lines. It cut down to infirmary numbers because now we're being proactive at screening and identify individuals at risk for either withdrawal or who meet criteria for opioid use disorder, and we can get them connected to care and treatment. Now, the other thing that was happening when individuals were not treated, once someone leave and return to the general population, meaning the community, it actually increased their risk of an overdose. So it's also a life-saving measure to be able to start individuals on treatment. And there is some protection with buprenorphine. Let's say if somebody, upon release, they go back to using, return to using, there's a protective factor to prevent an overdose. The other thing that we do know too is that we are connecting individuals for continued care of these medications. And so once they're started, they're going to either the community health centers, they're coming to our clinics. So we're maintaining individuals on care and treatment to reduce any adverse events related to with someone with a substance use disorder. So in really improving and in this program and expanding it, it truly is life-saving and having an impact on the community because we're capturing individuals. And then we've also been able to implement distributing naloxone upon release as well. So now individuals, they're leaving with Narcan, they're leaving with knowing how to use Narcan, resources. They're also getting additional, we call them harm reduction kits from the health department. So we've been able to really create a safety net around individuals with substance use disorders and connect them to our community partners to prevent an overdose and prevent a death, essentially.
Thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Cunningham, that's great work. And so you and your staff are to be commended on that. So Tim, just a couple of things to put into context. If you read reports coming out of the CDC, the fatality from opioid overdose is actually going down in the country. And so what you're seeing here is exactly what Dr. Cunningham said. It's better identification of people with substance use disorder. So in some ways, it's a misclassification bias before and after, right? And so this is identifying people earlier, getting them on the care that they need. Dr. Cunningham, do you know what percentage, and I know it's a difficult question to answer, and if you don't know, that's fine too. Do you know what percentage of people that have been started on medications that maintain it when they're out in the community? I guess you would know if they came to a county clinic, but I don't know if you have.
Yeah, we don't. I know Dr. O. So I do want Dr. Odag and Ernest McDowell. They have been phenomenal at taking this vision, and even Ava with really expanding our access to treatment. I know there was a discussion of us trying to track that, but you're right. We would need to have someone calling the clinics that you make your appointment. So we have not made it that far yet to be able to truly track
Yeah.
the outcomes. So that is something that I would like to do eventually. Of
Yeah.
course, we'll, staffing, but I think that's a good thing for us to track once we can get there.
Yeah, I wonder if we could look for a grant to do that. Anyway, okay,
Yeah.
I'm thinking out loud now, which is always dangerous. But Ava, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yes, obviously the conversation started and we are looking at data to make that more visible to everyone. I agree with you, regarding brands, we are looking into that opportunity as well. And just going back to the site visits, I think there is a correlation between our increasing recognizing the need for our med program and assessing mental health and behavioral health needs. So when we look at those numbers, obviously there is a correlation there. And it also has to do with staffing. We have more staffing in place, so we are able to assess and then continue care for the needs that. So that's the correlation.
Yeah, and if I was trying to remember, I thought we had increased our availability of psychiatric providers. And so Dr. McBride, I think that can explain why that number increased, is because there is more access.
That's also very helpful. Thank you.
Yep.
Access is good, as I put in the chat. Sadly, I think sometimes our criminal justice system is our safety net for mental health, and
It's one of the biggest mental health providers in the country is our justice services. So
yeah, I don't like that, but I appreciate that it's being done. I don't like it from a country point of view, but I applaud you for doing it.
absolutely. Other board members, questions, comments? Okay. Was there anything else that anybody had on the dashboard that they needed to ask a question about? Thank you, Dr. McBride, for bringing those 2 points up. Okay. And then Dr. Cunningham, I didn't know if there was anything else you wanted to bring up, or Ava, if you had anything else you wanted to share with the board.
I don't have anything. Ava, I don't know if you have anything, but I don't.
I don't, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might
Okay.
have. There are conversations about revamping our dashboard.
Okay.
We started a conversation with our leadership. There are a lot of conversations with Aaron to make that data again more visible, kind of proactively addressing and showing what we are doing. The conversation continues. We also decided that I will take on reporting out on that particular data starting in January.
Okay.
And it might not need to be on a monthly basis, maybe quarterly, depending on updates that we have. So the work continues. We are continuing to build a strong team. As I said, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. Thank you.
If I could make one other comment, sorry. I think sometimes it's worth pointing out something that we don't need to talk about, which is good. I'm not seeing any Sentinel events. And I just want to sort of point that out, which is good, because sometimes we have to talk about those. So that's a great point.
I agree. Thank you.
Don't jinx us, Dr. McBride.
Sorry.
I know. I thought the same thing. Like Dr. McBride.
You kind of like left that open there. Don't jinx us.
Yeah.
I just noticed you're throwing a no hitter.
You know?
I will say this though, while we're saying it, and Director Best and myself, we work really closely together. We communicate a lot, sometimes daily during the week. But I actually think that has trickled down to our teams, in which both of our teams are providing more care overall in the jail because there's communications between our teams, and then that filter up to us. And so, I mean, of course, I'm not just saying it's all on communication, but I've noticed that because of the connection and the passion and commitment between us as directors, I feel like it's filtering down to our teams, and they're modeling and mimicking what we're doing. And I think that's just creating a stronger safety net and care for individuals at the jail. That's my personal opinion, but that's kind of what I think is going on.
I would agree with that because you see the camaraderie going on. You see the ongoing discussions, meetings that they have as a group, especially, for example, like the mental health, team. You see that happens regularly. So
It is a true partnership. I can speak to that.
Great. Yes.
We're pointing out good news while pointing out
Yeah. I
other
think,
things we were talking about.
yeah, and I think Dr. Oldig, I've spoken with her a couple times, and she's a great addition to the team. So that's,
Yes, she is. I agree. I am so thankful to have her.
yes, absolutely. Okay. One question, hopefully a final question for Aaron. Do we know if so of course, I'm going to brag on our dashboard and everything, but is this a common sort of for jail services across the country? Do you know?
I mean, I think some, at least for the bigger ones.
For the
Like,
bigger ones.
When I went to a conference, it was last year,
Uh-huh.
I met some people who had actually even more robust data operations.
Yeah.
Largely because they had more people. Like I met basically the equivalent of me from Cook County, Chicago.
Mhm.
And it was like, she was the supervisor and she had like 10 of me working under her. So like for them, their data operation was massive.
Yeah,
Then for some of the other ones, it was really bare.
sure. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering.
Yeah.
It was more of a curiosity question. Okay, we're at that point of the agenda to solicit public comment. Do we have anybody who would like to comment? All right. One last go around on the table. Anybody else need to bring anything up?
I just noticed Aaron said that they had 10 people.
Well, Cook County's pretty big.
Right. 7,000, I think. Jail was like 7 times bigger than ours.
Yeah. Let's not pray for that.
Yeah, I know, right?
Be careful what you ask for. Okay, last opportunity for any of the board members. Any questions, comments, concerns?
I'm good.
Okay, all right.
I'm good too, and I appreciate the transparency and everybody was there to answer questions to get under the hood and sort of correct a newspaper article in live time. So that was great.
Very good.
I'm good, and appreciate all the sharing and all the hard work in support of what we are hearing today. So thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Okay, I think our next board meeting is scheduled for, I think it's in November, if I'm not mistaken, or is it in December?
Well, didn't we say we were gonna do it by?
We were gonna do every other month, but
Right.
then
We
we,
haven't had.
yeah,
And we
our
also
our
have
timing
the
got thrown
holidays.
off. Yeah.
You guys have to decide what you're gonna do.
Right.
Um,
So typically, our meetings are held on the fourth Friday of every month. And that always creates a little bit of conflict later on in the year because of course, then it butts up against Thanksgiving and Christmas holiday. So Tim, I see you have November 22nd. I will personally be out of town on that day. So, and then, yes, thank you, Tim, December 27th, which again, I'm assuming a lot of people will be taking some time with their families and rightfully so. So I am going to make the suggestion that our next meeting would be in January, the fourth Friday of January. That'll again give us some time to
January.
24th.
January 20th.
So unless there's any big concerns in it, and I think we're on a good, we're on a good path now with reporting and getting things, out for the board. So I'm personally comfortable with waiting until January, but I want to make sure that this is felt by the other members of the board as well. Anybody?
Andy, at that point, that works
Okay.
for me.
Okay.
That works for me, and I put in the chat, I won't be, I was gonna raise the point that I couldn't be here on November anyways, and December 27th, I think you'd be unlikely to get people to show up, so.
Yes, yeah. And
I support that, Dr. Garza, just, barring if there's anything that comes up
yes,
that is a major topic where we need to meet somehow or convene, then we leave that open.
yes, absolutely.
100% agree.
Okay.
I'm fine with that as well.
Okay, great. So we will have our next meeting on January 24th, January 24th. Okay. And then Bishop Hankerson will be through with all of his issues as well. And so, okay, that sounds great. Well, thank you all. Board members, do we need to do a roll call to go out? Okay. Well, before that, let me thank them all. Thank you, members of the board. If I don't see you again before the beginning of the new year, have a happy holiday. And thank you for all the effort that you put into this board work.
Thank you, and same to you and the rest of the team.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Dr. Garza, and everybody.
So I believe we need a motion if we're gonna do a vote.
Okay, we need a motion to go out of the board meeting.
To adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. Dr. McBride,
Second,
and Cinia seconded. And I think we lost Dr. McGuire. But anyway, go ahead.
We kind of go back and forth because all voted in favor, or we do.
I think we need,
Do we need a roll call?
I think we've done it in the past.
We've done both ways.
Yeah.
I do. Okay, Dr. McBride,
Aye.
Dr. Garza,
Yes.
Dr. Bozeman,
yes.
Dr. McGuire,
I think she.
maybe gone, Dr. Cunningham.
Yes.
Okay, we are adjourned. Have a good weekend, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Hey, Dr. Garza, can will you be available in like 20 minutes for a phone call?
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks.
Okay.
Bye.
Uh-huh.